Uh, just a minute. And good evening for everyone who are here. May I first request everyone to kindly put your videos on and mic on mute. May I first request everyone to kindly put your videos on. Thank you. So once again, I welcome you all to our 21st session of today's virtual program, which is on Introduction to Buddhism. And again, we are very, very glad and honored to invite among us Miss Manla, who will be speaking on Foundation of All Good Qualities today. So before we proceed, I would like to give a brief introduction about our today's speaker. So Dr. Man Wangla, she recently completed Nalanda Master's Course, Batch 1 from Tibet House, New Delhi, and she is experienced in the fields of higher education in public policy and media and communications in Singapore and Australia. In recent years, she has been delivering secular mindfulness-based training to organizations and different individuals. Thank you. So, Manla, please, you can proceed the session.
Yes, thank you very much, La, and thank you very much to Tibet House and to Geshe-la for giving me this opportunity to share this little Dharma talk. So, Lemonla, would you be able to make me a presenter so that I can share the slide? So in the meantime, a very happy Valentine's Day to everybody. And so I gather that most of the people who are attending in this room or maybe watching live are not celebrating. But if you are, then extra congratulations for making time to attend this Dharma-related activity. And I'm also glad to see a few familiar names in the room. So thank you very much for your support. Okay, so I am able to share screen. Mm, uh, okay. Okay, so as usual, before we start the session proper, let's just spend a few minutes to settle down our minds. So very consciously bringing your attention to this session and just doing a couple of minutes of breathing meditation for us to calm down. And so just bringing your attention to your breath. And whenever you feel distracted by anything, then just let go of the distraction and simply coming back to the breath and spending a couple of minutes, quiet moments in this way. And in this relative space of mental calmness, let us just set the motivation for participating in this session to make the most of the session in order to understand a bit more of the Dharma and be able to practice it so that we can achieve our aim of attaining full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so now I would like to invite you to formally set the motivation by reciting the refuge and bodhicitta prayer 3 times. Go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And so today, the talk is on the foundation of all good qualities, which is a prayer that is composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, the great Tibetan master. And just before sharing about the background of the prayer, I remember that I was introduced to this prayer many years ago by a teacher who then encouraged us to recite the prayer daily. And she was saying that it doesn't matter that we don't understand the meaning of all the verses, because this prayer actually helps us to plant the entire path to enlightenment in our mind stream. And she says that then in the meantime, we should just continue to learn the Dharma and to understand more. And then over time, then we'll understand more and more of the meaning of these verses. And so now it's true that I think I definitely understand a lot more than when I started with, although still not entirely. But I do hope that I understand enough to be able to share a little bit of something here tonight. And so about this prayer, it's said that in Buddha's lifetime, he gave 84,000 teachings. So these are teachings that are given at different places, in different situations, to different people with different needs, different interests. And so for someone who is relatively new to Buddhism, we can get a bit lost and quite confused as to where to start, what to practice, how to progress. And at times it might seem also a bit difficult to reconcile some teachings which may seem contradictory. And so most fortunately for us, this someone did the heavy lifting for us to clarify and put together all of the important points in Buddha's teachings and systematized it. And so this was the great Indian master from Nalanda Monastery, Lama Atisha Dipamkara Shrigana, in around the 11th century. And so when he was invited to Tibet in order to reestablish the Dharma there in the 11th century, because in Tibet there was a bit of 200 years of the Dharma being corrupted and suppressed. And there, Lama Atisha wrote a seminal text called A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And in that text, he actually drew out all the major points of Buddha's teachings and systematized it into clear steps known as the Lamrim, or the stages of the path or graduated path to enlightenment. And so sort of once all the topics were set out in a very orderly, systematic manner, then it can be shown that all of Buddha's teachings are not contradictory. None of them is contradictory, and that all of Buddha's teachings serve as personal advice for us. That means an individual practitioner can be practicing the different topics, according to what level of spiritual development they are at. And then around 300 years later, Lama Tsongkhapa, in around the 15th century, actually substantially fleshed out and clarified the points in Lama Atisha's text. And he wrote the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, or Lamrim Chenmo. And the foundation of all good qualities actually is an amazingly concise yet comprehensive teaching that contains all the essential points of the graduated path to enlightenment in just 14 verses. And so first, just to give an overview of this prayer, it's called the foundation of all good qualities. So we want to develop some good qualities. What are these all good qualities, the complete good qualities that we want to develop? And so it goes back to what is it that we are trying to achieve? through our practice of the Dhamma. And finally, through the practice of the Dhamma, we want to attain the complete good qualities of nirvana, which is the freedom from the suffering of samsara, and to achieve full enlightenment, infinite happiness, and to have the perfect ability to be able to help sentient beings. So finally, it is to become a fully awakened being or to achieve Buddhahood. And so whether we truly want to have this goal, is something for a deep reflection and a separate exercise. But if we sort of set this goal here, that yes, this is something that we want to achieve, to Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, then the question is, how do we get there? And this is where we are guided by this short prayer. And so verse 1 and 2 of the prayer actually is setting the foundation for the path. And here there are two topics on Guru devotion and precious human rebirth. Then we have verses 3 and 4, which is known as training your mind in the stages of the path shared with the small scope. And so here we recall that Buddha has given so many teachings in his lifetime, and it's for different people. And not everybody has the same goal in mind. And so for some, they may say, okay, I just want to, ensure that I have good rebirths in my future lives. And so for that, then the Buddha actually emphasized certain set of practices. And of course, for us, if our final goal is to achieve Buddhahood, it doesn't mean that we don't practice anything that's related to the small scope. But when we train our mind in that, we're saying that our aim is not just to attain a small scope kind of ambition, but it is to attain Buddhahood. But we do practice, and that's why we say we're training our mind in the stages of the path shared with the small scope. And here, small doesn't have any derogatory meaning. It's just that someone has a smaller ambition. So, and here under this, we have the topics of impermanence and death and karma. And then verses 5 and 6 is training our mind in the stages of the path shared with the medium scope. So a medium scope being or a middle capable being will be striving for liberation from samsara or cyclic existence. And here we reflect on the sufferings of samsara and engage in the 3 higher trainings, including the higher training in ethical discipline. And verses 7 to 9 is pertaining to the great scope. So this one is training in the methods and practices that will enable us to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And here the topics will be bodhicitta and emptiness. And so from verses 1 to 9, we are actually talking about practices in what is known as the Sutrayana or the Sutra vehicle. And then in verses 10 to 12, Lama Tsongkhapa actually talks about the Vajra vehicle, so Vajrayana. And then verses 13 to 14 is the dedication verses. So this is the overall structure of the short text. And so now going into the individual verses. So the first verse reads, the foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correct devotion to him or her is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him or her with great respect. Now, so first, Guru is actually a Sanskrit word. In Tibetan, it's called Lama, and it's translated in English as spiritual mentor, or sometimes a spiritual friend or virtuous friend. And so when we talk about a guru or spiritual mentor, it is much more than just a teacher who kind of imparts knowledge to us, as in the school system. For our spiritual path, there are actually sort of different levels of teacher. And as we progress along the path, then the more we will be needing teachers who are more sophisticated in their learning and realizations, who embody the practice. And so a spiritual mentor is someone that we want to be guided by, whom we want to form a closer relationship and a longer term relationship with. And gurus or spiritual mentors don't just kind of come to us. It doesn't mean that we attend a teaching and someone becomes our spiritual mentor. In fact, we are the one who consciously make a decision to form a mentor-disciple relationship with the spiritual mentor. And so there are also certain situations where the teacher automatically becomes our spiritual mentor. And that's when we take like our refuge and precepts, monastic ordinations, bodhisattva vows, tantric initiations. But there again, we also have the choice of whether we want to participate in the ceremony. And so, why do we need a spiritual mentor? And why is it that spiritual mentor is the root of the path? So we can imagine, that even for our daily functionings, our knowledge and our skills, we need teachers to be guiding us. What more if we want to undertake this pretty long journey of a mental transformation, that's going to take many lifetimes. And so, spiritual mentor being closely guided by someone is very, very important. And that's why it's likened to being the root of the path, which means that, just as, a stable root is needed for the trunk and the branches and the leaves and the trees, the fruits to grow and be nourished, we need a stable devotion to spiritual mentors in order for our spiritual realizations to be nourished and to grow. And so that's why, the spiritual mentor is known as the root of the path. And correct devotion to him or her is also sometimes known as guru devotion. But when we mention guru devotion, some of us may have this idea that it might be kind of just, blindly, feverishly sort of surrendering to some holy figure, surrendering. And so the Tibetan translation actually is relying on a spiritual mentor. And so, if we think of it this way, then it probably sets out the relationship more clearly and in a less value-laden way. And so how do we correctly rely on this spiritual mentor? The correct devotion is done in two ways. One is through our thoughts, and then the other one is through our actions. And so devoting to thoughts means we want to cultivate two mental attitudes in relation to the spiritual mentor. One is generating faith through seeing their good qualities. So seeing their learning, their realizations, their meditative abilities, their kindness, and so on. And the respect is by remembering their kindness. Why are they kind? So Buddha Shakyamuni is very, very kind to have established the teaching in this world, but he's no longer around physically. And our parents are very kind to us. Maybe some close friends are very kind to us. Our teachers, in the schools are very kind to us. But only the spiritual mentor will teach us the Dharma, which will enable us to be fully liberated from the fears of samsara and to enjoy infinite happiness and be able to help others perfectly. So it is really through their kindness that we have been introduced to the Dharma and to be guided through our practice. And so this is remembering their kindness. And if we have deep faith in our spiritual mentors' good qualities, and we have heartfelt gratitude towards them, then obviously it's easier that we will be more receptive to whatever they guide us on and listen to their instructions and take their instructions to heart. And then that will enable us to grow spiritually, in a much quicker way. And devoting through action, there are three principal practices. One is making material offerings. The other one is offering service. And because our spiritual mentors have good qualities, they are kind to us, they play a really important role in our life. So the karma of making offerings to them, offering service, is actually much greater. So they are a very powerful object with respect to our karma. So we do accumulate great merit by doing, making offerings to them, making offering service to them. And offering service can include assisting them in their projects, or if we have the good fortune to be living near to them, to be running personal errands for them, caring for them, and so on. And then the last one is offering our practice. And in fact, this is said to be the best offering because it means that we are taking on the spiritual mentor's instructions and putting it into practice in order to transform our mind. And sometimes when we think about listening to our spiritual mentor's instructions, we do have a sense that, okay, if it is a personally given advice and one-on-one, then that is really great instructions. And so here I would like to just highlight a paragraph from His Holiness's book with Venerable Children on the foundation of Buddhist practice that mentions this. It says, attentively taking the teacher's advice and instructions to heart by putting them into practice enables us to plumb the depth of the teachings and integrate them into our very being. Do not think that these instructions must be given one-to-one. Even when we are in an audience of 1,000 people, our spiritual mentors' spiritual instructions remain the key to actualizing the path. So I thought that is very important to remind ourselves of. Sometimes when we are in this huge crowd, we tend to miss it and say, "Oh, that may not be just for me." So it is. And so I've mentioned just now that our spiritual mentors are very powerful objects with which we create karma. And so if we correctly devote to them, we actually accumulate the most extensive merit and can gain realizations quickly. But sometimes along the way, some students start to see faults in their spiritual mentors, maybe seeing some improper behavior, and then they may start to, get angry with their spiritual mentor or maybe to despise them. And because our spiritual mentors are very powerful objects, and so if we do that, then we create considerable negative karma. And so it is for this reason that our teachers have been saying to us that don't rush into forming mentor-disciple relationship. We can attend teachings, and then we just observe and investigate the potential mentor's qualities. And Buddha has actually enumerated these qualities. And so, not to rush into this. And in the meantime, Buddha Shakyamuni is our most revered spiritual mentor. And so if you, this is a really, really huge topic. And if you are interested in reading more about it, then His Holiness's book has a very good section that's very well balanced and comprehensive in this foundation of Buddhist practice. And so I highly recommend that you read the section there. Okay. So now going to verse number 2, which is on precious human rebirth. It says, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. And so, precious human rebirth, actually, we can say that we have a precious human rebirth only on the basis of having 18 extraordinary conditions, known as the 8 freedoms, which are 8 situations with which we are free that give this life great meaning, and 10 richnesses or endowments, which are 10 things that we have received that enrich our mind, our life enormously. And so these 8 freedoms are freedom from being born in the hell realms, not being born as a hungry ghost, not being born in an animal realm, not being born as a long life god. This is a god that's really, really dull but lives for a long time. So not being born at a time when the founder Buddha has not appeared, not being born in a place with no dharma, not being born with defective senses, and then freedom from holding wrong views. And so this last one is really, you can see from around us, right? They are just friends and our relatives who are simply kind of, not interested in the Dharma. Or if you try to share something that's related to the Dharma, then they say, no, cannot be this way. So that's holding wrong views, and that's really preventing us then from trying to access the Dharma. And the 10 endowments, there are 2. One is a personal endowments. So the conditions that we have, being born as a human being, born in a religious country, having a well-functioning body and mind, not having committed any of the 5 immediate negativities, which will be very heavy negative karmas, such as killing parents, and so on. So having faith in the Dharma. And then 5 circumstantial endowments, and that's being born in a period where Buddha Shakyamuni has appeared on this earth. He has taught the Dharma and turned the wheel of Dharma. So when the teachings have been reviewed, when the complete teachings exist, when the teachings are being followed, and when practitioners have the necessary condition to practice Dharma. So, just have a think for ourselves. And if we possess these 18 conditions, then truly rejoice that we have a precious human rebirth. And then next, just reflecting on the difficulty of obtaining this precious rebirth in this life, and the difficulty of having a precious human rebirth in our next lives, because it's not so easy. And here we can think from the point of view of causes and conditions. So a lot of causes and conditions have to come together for us to have a human life. And we can trace back to having ethics, generosity, making prayers, and so on. And examples means using some analogy. And in the traditional text, there's this very cute example, an interesting example that says that just imagine a blind turtle swimming in the sea, and every 100 years it pokes its head up, and there's a little golden ring that's floating on the water. And then, what is the chances that this blind turtle will poke his head through the golden ring? So that's just talking about the rarity of having a human rebirth. And in terms of numbers, so if we compare, the number of human beings to, say, the number of insects, the number of animals, and so on, then you can find that, actually, being born as a human being is rarer, much rarer than, having a rebirth or as an animal. And so this is it. And so sometimes when we run through this, it may just, think of it as being very dry list, and it doesn't really speak to us. So finally, the main message is just be very grateful that we are having a very, very fortunate human rebirth. Draw on the points and examples that speak to you. And finally, we should just come to this conclusion that because we are so fortunate in this human situation right now, to not waste our time on things that will eventually not matter to us. And so this really linked to the next verse, that actually our life is as impermanent as a water bubble. You poke and it disappears. So remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of virtuous and non-virtuous karmas follow. So, and it is not difficult if we want to be looking at examples and reflecting on it. It is really a matter of whether we do want to draw on the examples that are around us to deeply think about death and impermanence. Right? I mean, who would think that someone's sleeping at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? And suddenly there's an earthquake, the building collapses on you and you die? So our life is just as fragile as this. And so here it is really to engage in the meditation on death, to increase our urgency of wanting to do the Dharma practice, which is to reflect that death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, and at the time of death, nothing can benefit us except whatever imprints we've planted on our mind that will travel to the next life. And so, really to think deeply on that. And so finding firm and definite conviction in this bless me to always be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. And so when we die, right, all that's left is all the imprints that we have planted on our mental continuum of all the virtuous acts, non-virtuous acts. And so non-virtues will result in suffering, virtues will result in happiness. And so what this finding firm and definite conviction is really finding firm and definite conviction in the infallibility of karma. So again, back to this earthquake, right? So we have read that so many people have lost their lives, but there have also been cases of rescues. And so this one is a picture of a mother and a 10-year-old baby, a 10-day-old baby who have been rescued after being stuck for 4 days in the rubble. And so some have called it a miracle. And then, we will ask, is it simply because it's miracle? It's just lucky? If this is random miracle, then, why do other things in our life seem to follow an order with cause and effect? Why is it that if we don't plant a seed, the fruit will not grow? Or why is it that if we don't gather the ingredients, we will not have food? Why is it that if we don't study, we will not have good grades? So, is it really random? And then on the other hand, if we think that, okay, maybe someone is deciding it, then who decides? And who decides who lives, who dies? And so, thinking about it in this way, then we will come to a greater conviction that, yeah, a karma will be able to explain this what we observe. That basically karma is neutral. It's a law of nature. You reap what you sow. So it doesn't say, okay, you're good, so you're rewarded in this way or not. So it's just karma. And of course, this has to be tied also with our belief that there are many lives, because this is from karma that's accumulated over many lifetimes. But once we have a definite conviction in this, so there are four general characteristics of karma. The first, karma is definite. Second, karma is expandable. So from a small seed, the kind of big result will grow, whether it's a bad seed or good seed. Yeah? And if the cause has not been created, the result won't be experienced, and karma doesn't get lost. So if we are firmly convinced of this, then I think it just naturally leads us to want to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all the virtuous deeds. And here, usually, of course, there are many, many negativities that we can engage in, but usually 10 non-virtues are enumerated that we should refrain from. And these are 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the mind. And so it's killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lie, divisive speech or slander, harsh speech, idle gossip, covetousness, ill will, and wrong views. So wrong views pertain primarily to not believing in cause and effect or not believing in karma. And so then engaging in the virtuous deeds will be sort of engaging in the opposites of these. Trying to protect lives, trying to give, rather than steal, engage in morality, speaking the truth, being gentle in our speech, and then also sort of like having a firm conviction in the law of karma. And samsaric splendors are unsatisfying and unreliable. Seeking them is the door to all suffering. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. So here we are starting the topic of training the mind that's shared with the person in the medium scope or the middle capable being. Previously, so for someone who is aspiring, mainly to obtain good rebirths, then the main practice is to try to refrain from the 10 non-virtues, engage in the 10 virtues. And now we are sort of asked to think even a bit more. Even if we obtain good rebirths in the next life, what about the next? What about the next? Many lives. And so as long as we are sort of happy to just stay in samsara, actually we'll just be experiencing endless suffering. And so here it's pointed out that samsaric splendors are unsatisfying and unreliable. And there are actually 3 kinds of suffering that we talk about. The first is the manifest suffering, or what is known as suffering of suffering. And so these are the manifest pains, physical pains, mental pains that nobody wants. And then there's what is known as the suffering of change, which is actually referring to our temporal happiness or mundane happiness that do not last. And then finally, there's a pervasive condition suffering, which just refers to, cycling endlessly within the 6 realms in samsara involuntarily. And so just up and down. And so these are the 3 kinds of suffering. And samsaric splendors actually refers to the second kind. So you're thinking that, oh, it's very nice, to have a nice meal, to go for a nice trip and watch an interesting movie and so on, without realizing that this mundane happiness is what is trapping us in samsara. And sooner or later, chasing after the mundane happiness will cause us either to engage in creating some negative karmas that will result in the manifest suffering, or it will just simply keep us, in this endless loop of cycling in samsara. And so here I I like a couple of analogies, that really gives us a flavor of, how vicious, samsaric splendors are. And one is the description in the 37 Practices of Bodhisattva that says that samsaric pleasures is like salt water. The more you drink, the more thirsty you get. And so if we really, really think about it, that's just endless. And it doesn't satiate us. There's no sort of everlasting happiness that can be found in samsaric pleasures. And the other one is the analogy that I heard recently, which is like you have an itch on your body and you try to scratch it and it gives you some relief. But then the, the then you want to even scratch it even more, right? The itch increases and you scratch it even more. And so finally you're sort of scratching it until the skin breaks. And so I think that, these are sort of good graphic examples that we can think about, to really get a feel that no, I don't want to be trapped in this samsaric pleasures, the prison of samsaric pleasures. And then having reflected very well on this, then to generate this strong wish to renounce samsara, say, I want to attain the bliss of liberation from samsara. I would want to attain nirvana. Then, led by this pure thought, so the strong wish of nirvana, then we will engage in what is known as the practice of the three higher trainings, which is the sort of principal methods for exiting from samsara. And these are the higher trainings in ethical discipline, morality, and concentration and wisdom. And of these, the training in ethical discipline is the basis for the other two trainings. And the higher training in ethical discipline is specifically related to keeping the Pratimoksha vows, or the vows of individual liberation. And so here there are 8, with 2 categories. One are the lay vows, which is the one-day vow, layman vow, laywoman vow. And then there's the vow of the ordained, which is novice monk's vows, novice nun's vows, probationer nun's vow, fully ordained monk's vow, fully ordained nun's vow. And so, like, for example, the lay person's vow will be, say, taking a refuge vow and then taking the 5 day precepts. And so, because this is the basis for the 2 other trainings, it is called the root of the trainings. And when we say that, we want to bring in mindfulness, alertness, and great caution, then it is connoting that we want to develop some sense of control of the mind, so that we can remember and apply our attention on the virtuous object. And also, the moment we notice that an affliction is about to arise, then to be able to intercept it and to stop it. So this is the training that's shared with the medium scope. And then the next verse moves on to the great scope to say, just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train Supreme Bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. So if we have trained well in the sort of earlier subjects and really developed for ourselves, how unsatisfactory samsaric existence is, how we will suffer in samsara, and how our life is so fragile through thinking about impermanence and death, and also thinking about our precious human rebirth, then I think it is quite easy to then translate it to thinking about the situation of all mother sentient beings. So people who are close to us, people who are not so close to us, all the other beings, that they are suffering in the same way, that they want to avoid pain, they want to achieve happiness, but they rarely find lasting happiness. They experience a lot of pain. They are cycling endlessly in samsara. They are subject to impermanence and death. And I think the crux is most of the people, of 8 billion people, most of them are not aware of how to get out of this rut and how to attain the freedom from fears of samsara and to achieve a state of more lasting infinite happiness. And so if we think about it this way, our mothers, our friends, not being even aware of the Dharma, not being aware of the way to achieve the happiness, and we have been exposed to the Dharma, we have the precious human rebirth, then all the more we will find it very unbearable that we just leave them here to suffer. and sort of we train and sort of get the happiness ourselves. And so that is when we would want to, develop this thought or this mind of bodhicitta. And so here more on why are they called migratory beings? Migratory just means migrating involuntarily from life to life. And mother here is actually saying that, because we have many, many lifetimes, then, every sentient being at some point has been our very kind mother. Not necessarily a human mother, animal mother, but they have been very, very kind to us. And so if we think that, they have all been our mothers, then it becomes even more unbearable, that the sentient beings are suffering. But again, if you are hearing this for the first time, or if you have not been thinking about it very much, then it might be quite difficult to accept at this point that all beings have been our mothers before. And so, it is when we start to then want to cultivate bodhicitta, then we will also bring in a deeper reflection on why beings have been our mothers over all the different lifetimes. But at this moment in time, just think about that plight. I like to use this analogy of like a hamster's wheel. And this is what we are all on at the moment. We are just cycling, from higher existence, higher states of rebirth, lower states of rebirth, cycling endlessly, endlessly. And I mean, just looking at this graphic, I feel that it's really, really tiring. And so if I want to get out of it, I want to help others get out of it. And, and so this is when this bodhicitta mind comes in. It is the wish to attain full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why? Because at this moment, even though I want to help, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the skills. And who has all this perfect ability? It has to be someone who has an awakened mind, who is free from all the mental defilements, who is the most skillful, who can understand individual beings' dispositions and can help them effectively. And so then we generate this mindset, a wish, may I become Buddha for the benefit of all my dear mother sentient beings. Then even if I develop bodhicitta, but I don't practice the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. So, I mean, it's well and good that I generate this aspiration, right? May I become a Buddha to benefit all my dear mother sentient beings. But then, having generated this strong aspiration, I have to act on it. And so here, it says that if you do, then first practice the 3 types of morality or ethical discipline. And this will mean the morality of refraining from negativities, the morality of gathering virtues, and the morality of engaging in the welfare of sentient beings. And here, Lama Tsongkhapa actually enumerated about 11 ways to do so, which will include, caring for the sick, giving guidance to people who are confused in difficult situations, and comforting those who are in grief. And then, having generated the mind of bodhicitta, we might sort of formalize it a bit by sort of promising, that we will engage in aspirational bodhicitta. But aspirational bodhicitta is also just a wish. And so finally, what we want to do is to develop engaged bodhicitta, which is to take the bodhisattva vow to train in the deeds of the bodhisattva. And this includes training in the 6 perfections or 6 paramitas, which are generosity, ethical discipline, patience, enthusiasm, concentration, and wisdom. And so once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. And so finally, we have developed, let's say we have developed a bodhicitta. We want to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. What will enable us to become this fully enlightened? And so for that, we will have to develop our wisdom. So it is the wisdom that realizes emptiness, which will be a direct antidote to the self-grasping ignorance that is at the root of our suffering. And so, how to develop this wisdom? that realizes the emptiness? First, I have to pacify distractions to wrong objects. And at the moment, our mind is just very, very untamed and unruly. But basically, our mind is just chasing after, all the information that's being brought to it by our senses. And so, first, we have to start to gain some control over our mind. And this is through the cultivation of what is known as calm abiding or single pointed concentration or shamatha. And so, in relation to the development of emptiness, first we have to cultivate the calm abiding that focuses on emptiness. And then we bring in the analysis that investigates the meaning of reality. That means the analytical meditation on emptiness, which is also known as special insight. And then the union or the integration of these two, the unified path of calm abiding and special insight, will enable us to develop this wisdom that will directly be able to cognize or see emptiness and emptiness of inherent existence. And that will then counter, our afflictions, which are sort of obscuring us from developing a fully awakened mind. And so here, this involves the integration of the last two perfections of concentration and wisdom in order to develop the wisdom directly realizing emptiness of inherent existence. This is known as the only liberating path to enlightenment. Everything else is helping us to go towards enlightenment. It is only through cultivating this mind of wisdom that we are able to become fully enlightened. And why the need for both calm abiding and special insight? So here our teachers have used a very, very good analogy, which is that if you want to see, let's say, a painting in the darkness, you want to see clearly, what you will need is a light that's very bright and a light that is also very stable. And so the stability will be given by the calm abiding, and the brightness will be given by the special insights or the analytical meditation. And so, if the light is flickering, then you can't see the object clearly, right? Or if the light is very, very dim, you also cannot see the object very clearly. And so finally, we need the union of calm abiding and special insight in order to develop this direct realization of emptiness. And so up to now, from verses 1 to 9, we've been talking about practices that is in the sutra vehicle. And now Lama Tsongkhapa starts to proceed to talking about practice of the Vajrayana, the Vajra vehicle. So having become a pure vessel by training in the Jhana path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. Now, so entry into the Vajrayana is through receiving an empowerment or initiation from a fully qualified spiritual teacher. So a teacher who is fully qualified in the Vajra vehicle. And then once you do that, this teacher becomes your tantric master. So the consequence can be very, very serious. We take it very seriously. Yeah. And Vajrayana sometimes, it's been presented as being a tradition that's distinct from Mahayana. But this is actually not the case. Actually, Vajrayana is a subdivision of Mahayana, which comprises the Sutra vehicle, also known as the Perfection vehicle, Paramitayana, and then the Vajrayana, which is also known as Mantrayana or Tantrayana. And in both vehicles, the practitioners have the same goal, and which is namely to achieve Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So it is the same bodhicitta motivation. What is different is in terms of the method. So practitioners in Vajrayana actually engage in special techniques that will enable them to gain full enlightenment even in one lifetime, or maybe 7 lifetimes or 16 lifetimes. So in other words, at much greater speed than the 3 countless great aeons that would take a practitioner of Sutrayana to reach full enlightenment. So our teachers have likened the difference between sort of riding a rocket and riding a bicycle. But the thing is, riding a rocket can be super fast, but it can also be very, very dangerous and fatal if you're not fully qualified. And so our teachers have emphasized, that there are prerequisites for entering the Vajrayana. And so this is actually also illustrated by Lama Tsongkhapa. You must become a pure vessel by training in the general path. Then you enter the Vajrayana. And so what are the prerequisites? Someone must have experience of the three principal aspects of renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom realizing emptiness. Or if no experience, then at least some intellectual understanding, familiarity of it. And then of these three aspects, bodhicitta should be the primary motivation. Then we are ready and prepared to enter the Vajra vehicle. So here I would just like to pose a question. But do you think that there is any difference in the strength of compassion and bodhicitta between a practitioner on the sutra path and a practitioner on the tantra path? Anybody would like to share or hazard a guess? So sometime back, I was like kind of sitting in one of the classes, and I remember the teacher posing this question. Anyone would like to just come in and share what you think? Do you think that there's any difference in the strength of compassion and bodhicitta between a practitioner on the sutra path and a practitioner on the tantra path? Just please unmute if you like. Okay. Have a think about it for yourself. Yeah, so I don't remember, what the students' answers were in that class, but I do remember the teacher's answer, which is that for a practitioner on the Tantra path, your compassion has to be even deeper and stronger and more intense, and your bodhicitta more intense. Why? Because it is because you have such intense compassion that you cannot bear to see the sentient beings suffering, that you want to achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. So it's not some ego trip like one lifetime, I'm so capable and I achieved my enlightenment in one lifetime. It's really because we are motivated by a very, very strong compassion and bodhicitta that we say, okay, let's try to do it as fast as possible. So at that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I've become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. So two attainments, the attainments just refer to spiritual attainments of deeds, known as siddhis in Sanskrit, or spiritual realizations. And so the two attainments refer to common attainments like clairvoyance or being able to read past lives, and supreme attainments, which are advanced spiritual qualities, and the highest of which is full enlightenment. And vows and samayas, basically the difference between a vow and a samaya, I would say, is just vows are things that you try to refrain from doing. And samayas or pledge is to try to apply yourself in a way that's in harmony with how the truth is, so that's the literal meaning. And it basically is just pledges that you undertake to do. So vows, things that you undertake to restrain from, pledges that you undertake to do. And so keeping pure vows and samayas is very, very important. And that's why Lama Tsongkhapa actually says, want to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Is as important as protecting your life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. So, this is with reference to the highest Yoga Tantra of the 4 classes of Tantra, which are sort of practices for disciples of different capabilities. And the 2 stages refers to the generation stage and the completion stage. And so generation stage is just a kind of maturation, training in maturing your mind in order to be able to engage in the completion stage practices. And 4 sessions is really how we organize the different sort of blocks of our days, the practices in throughout the day in different blocks. And so 4 sessions you just refer to, so 6 hours each. And so if you notice, in each of these verses, it always ends with, please bless me to do something. Please bless me to. And so then the question is, what exactly are we seeking blessing for, and what exactly is the blessing? Because sometimes when we say, okay, please bless me, we tend to think of, maybe light shining from the Buddha, onto our head, and our teacher patting us on the head, and so we get the blessing. But what exactly is the real blessing? And so I think the real blessing really is when we are inspired and receive our teacher's teachings and put it into practice. And then this has the beneficial effect of helping us to cleanse our mental defilements, transform our mind. Then in that way, we are receiving the real blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So the last 2 verses are dedication. And here it says, like that, may the gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. And so our gurus have been most kind in showing us the path, in guiding us along the path. So we would want to dedicate, and it is through that kindness that we are able to accumulate this merit from the practice. And so we want to dedicate our merit to their long lives, and also to the long lives of our Dharma brothers and sisters. And so please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. So outer hindrances will be referring to things that are external, some beings harming us or disturbing our Dharma practice. And inner hindrances will be something that obstacles that are related to us, maybe having sickness, or maybe being overwhelmed with mental afflictions. So we seek blessings also to be able to pacify completely all the outer and inner hindrances. And in all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dhamma. By completing the qualities of the stages and the paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. So we pray also that we are never separated from perfect gurus in our future lives, because it goes back to what was highlighted in verse 1. A perfect pure guru is the root of the path. So without our spiritual mentors, we are not going to be able to practice well, and we're not going to be able to gain our realizations. So we pray that we are never separated from perfect spiritual mentors in life after life. And the purpose of wanting to meet with them is so as to receive the teachings and be able to grow. And so, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. And through correct devotion to our spiritual mentors, then may I be able to gain all the realizations from practicing the Sutrayana and Vajrayana. And so then finally, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. So Vajradhara is the form of the Buddha when he teaches Tantra. And so this concludes the foundation of all good qualities. And so now I'd just like to invite any questions that you may have. So anyone has any questions or any thoughts or experience to share? Oh, thank you, Dina. Yeah. So if not, then what I would like to invite everyone to do actually is to do a recitation of the entire foundation of all good qualities, which doesn't take so long. And sort of hopefully on the basis of having thought through it a bit more and gaining a little bit of understanding on some of the terms and so on, and to try and really get a deeper flavor from doing the recitation. So Venerable Geshe-la always said, when we are doing the recitation, in order to make this recitation the most beneficial, not only do we just make sure that the words are being understood, but that we should try to reflect on the meaning, and better still, to invoke the experience. And so, for example, in relation to the precious human rebirth, as we read it, you really get a sense of how fortunate we are at this point in time, or really get a sense of, how much suffering we're going through and how much suffering mother sentient beings are going through. So I'd like to invite everybody just to do this recitation. So the foundation of all good qualities is a kind and perfect pure guru. Correct devotion to him or her is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great efforts, please bless me to rely on him or her with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of virtuous and non-virtuous karmas follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativity, and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Samsaric splendors are unsatisfying and unreliable. Seeking them is the door to all suffering. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I've fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop bodhicitta, but I don't practice the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I've pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I've become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the 2 stages, the essence of Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma by completing the qualities of the stages and paths. May I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. So, any other questions before I wrap up? Okay, so I still have a couple of slides to wrap up, then Manla.
Manla, I think there's a question from Ole, I guess.
Okay, sure. Yes, Ole, please. Is it in the chat box? Because I can't see the chat.
Thank you very much. First of
Yeah.
all, I wanted to thank you for the very interesting presentation and information you shared with us. My question is not about the content of what you presented, but about the follow-up of what we did together with you. Is there any chance that you could distribute your presentations so that later on we could get back to the information and think it over again via email or other possible variants?
Maybe you could share your email with Letmonla or Tibet House, and then we can follow up on that. Because
Okay.
otherwise, the recording is always on the YouTube, if I understand correctly. So if you would like to just review it, you can also be watching the recordings.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ole. Thank you. So, any other questions? If not, then I will go on to share a bit of concluding thoughts. Again, sort of many years ago, I had this when I was still able to kind of fit into a small size T-shirt. I had this T-shirt with the cover that says, ignorance is bliss, and so it shows a big fish chasing after a small fish, and so the question is really, is ignorance really bliss, right? And so if we come in to the Dharma, most of the time from somewhere where, because we find that there's something lacking in life, or there's some dissatisfaction, that there can be more meaning in life, and then if we come to understand that it is really the self-grasping ignorance that's at the root of all our problems, then definitely ignorance is not bliss, and we should do our best to try and eliminate and eradicate this ignorance. And so here, I'm sort of reminded of a daily prayer or daily reflection that one of my teachers shared, which is sort of involves thinking about our precious human rebirth. And there is also one point to reflect on that says that reflect on how fortunate it is that we have come under the care of spiritual teachers who have taught us the complete and unmistaken path. So if we have a think, how many people may find that their life situation is not very satisfactory, would like to look for a way to increase their happiness, and have been directed to mistaken paths that will just bind them more in samsara, won't get them out of samsara, won't allow them to achieve infinite happiness. Or if we can think of situations where we might be exposed to different bits of Buddha's teachings, but might just think that, okay, one particular aspect is the entire practice that will lead us to enlightenment. And so if we think about that, then we really have to be very, very grateful that there are masters like Lama Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa and our teachers who follow the lineage of Lama Tsongkhapa, who then traces the lineage back to the great Indian masters and who trace back to Buddha Shakyamuni, that they have introduced us to this entire path that then allows us to know, exactly where each bit of teachings that we come across fit, and when we should be practicing, what kind of teachings along the way. And so really to view ourselves as being so fortunate to have come under the care of the spiritual teachers who have shown us the complete and unmistaken path. And in fact, Lama Tsongkhapa in another composition has highlighted that even hearing or teaching this Lamrim tradition just once, that embodies the essence of all the Buddha's words, gathers waves of merit equal to hearing or teaching all the doctrines of the Buddha. And so no doubt we have created great merit today, not by the power of anything that I say, but simply by the power of Lama Tsongkhapa's words and by reciting the prayer. And so let us just rejoice very greatly at the merits that we have created, and then make the dedication in this very simple verse, which actually also outlines the entire path, starting with generating the bodhicitta mind, and then cultivating all the practices in order to achieve the goal of bodhicitta, which is to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So let us just read this dedication. So, May the precious Buddhist mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that bond have no decline, but increase forevermore. So thank you very much for attending this session. Just a little note that maybe I'm just preempting Monla, that in 2 weeks' time, Dr. Pujala will be actually giving a talk to expand more about the Lumbrim. So if you are really interested in knowing more, please do attend the next talk as well.
Thank you so much, Manla, for this very interesting and wonderful session and on speaking on behalf of the Pet House. Personally, I always feel overwhelmed. The way you present your points is just so crystal clear and really easy to understand. And I think everyone feels the same. I think we should definitely learn how to make a PowerPoint presentation from you, I think. It's just very powerful. So once again, I thank you, Manla, for this very interesting session. So we'll conclude here. And I thank all the participants here for joining today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Manla. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patricia.
Allah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.